In today's episode, we are thrilled to be joined by Karen Hayward. Karen, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure to be here. So you've been at Chief Outsiders for almost 12 years now. I'd love to hear one, what is Chief Outsiders and what do they do? But then more importantly, what inspired you to join them?
12 years has flown by. Who would have thought? Chief Outsiders is the largest national consulting firm of senior executives, chief marketing officers, chief sales officers. We also have a division one tier down called Team Outsiders that provides for different mid level marketing roles and specialties. And what inspired me to join? Well, I had grown up in Xerox, Canada for 20 years, decided to immigrate to a bigger fish pond and came to the States and landed in Mountain View, California, and said, well, after working for a couple of mid-market companies and we sold them, was like, what do I want to do? I really wanted to take everything I'd learned in the big company and bring it right sized to a mid-market company who may not have the kind of resources that I had had growing up or the training.
That makes sense. Are you Canadian?
Yeah, from
You
Montreal originally.
you've lost your accent. You've been here too long. Couldn't tell at all. And so Chief Outsiders mostly does is it mostly fractional work or is it full time or
So we do fractional, interim, part-time, we call ourselves strategic operators. We do advisory, and
co-
coaching and
coaching? Yeah.
project work.
Great, great. So you can come in and you're kind of a Swiss Army knife that can help with any marketing or sales issue a company's having.
Well said.
Okay. I can be hired.
Cool.
So you also, as Demetra's mentioned up top, are an author, and so you've written "Stop Random Acts of Marketing." What does that phrase mean to you?
Well, you mentioned earlier I've been here 12 years at Chief Outsiders. So over the course of that time, I kept seeing these mid-market companies. Oh, let's do this. Oh, let's do a trade show. Oh, let's change our logo. And it was all just random stuff, not routed in marketplace, facts, in an understanding of the competitors and understanding of where we want to go, the financials of the company. And so I thought, just let's stop the madness. So I just came up with Stop Random Acts of Marketing.
I love it. And so I'm sure you've written a whole book about this. I'm sure there's a lot of advice in there. But what are some of like the top things that CEOs or CMOs can do to avoid the trap of random acts of marketing?
It's so interesting. If you were to get in your car in San Jose and say, I want to go to New York, the likelihood is that you'd have a map, right?
Yep.
CEOs have no problem deciding we're going to spend marketing money here and there, and there's no map. There's no map. So I really believe that companies, if you're going to invest in a direct sales force, you should have a plan that generates opportunities for them. So you're not expecting today's salespeople to operate out of the yellow pages, which most of the people on this call don't even know what are. But that you need a plan, and people will spend money. CEOs will spend money hiring direct salespeople they know are not maybe going to produce in 6 months, 50% of the time, yes, 50% of the time, no. But they won't spend that same amount of money building a marketing plan, a go to market plan that is actually going to make all those other resources successful. And that just boggles my mind. And I see it over and over and over because a lot of them just don't know what good looks like.
Mhm.
Right? And frankly, everything a CMO or a chief sales officer brings to the job is a view of the business. So how do we take the financials of the business and ladder that down to a plan to get the outcomes that you need?
Yeah. How do you generate enough pipeline and marketing pipeline or product led pipeline, whatever the pipeline is that you need to generate to make sure those salespeople have something to work? And that starts with how many sales do we need to make and working your way backwards.
Because the point that gets missed so much of the time, maybe not so much in SaaS companies, but in a lot of other industries, is really what are the financials? How much should we invest in marketing to drive a particular outcome, right? We can figure out, we need this many leads, whatever. But people skip the step of actually asking, like, what should we be investing to get a qualified lead? What's our customer acquisition cost that makes sense? What is the lifetime value of a client? In what segment? I mean, there are all these decisions that you need to make that really lay the foundation of the house. And instead, what people do is they skip the foundation, they build the house, it crumbles, and they go, see, marketing's not for my company.
It has only worked for thousands of other companies, but for us, it's not for us. Yeah.
We're a snowflake, we're different.
Yeah. Yep. That's well, I'd love to dig in on that. You've mentioned this a little bit. I think one of the common mistakes in go to market is not having a plan. But what are some of the more specific go to market mistakes that you see that hold companies back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it falls back to market insight. So they'll decide, the business will decide from the CEO standpoint, here's how we're going to go to market. And instead, really great marketing or really great go to market plan comes from having a really good understanding of your customers, of your competitors, and the strengths of your company. And oftentimes they'll rely on the strengths of their company for their go to market. But, like I always say when I talk to CEOs, they're all trying to outfox you, all these other competitors. And so staying up with them and understanding how they're moving in the marketplace and how you can actually, position yourself to win before you actually spend a dollar going out and trying to uh, drive opportunities or marketing programs.
Yeah, so starting with that customer lens and market lens and understanding that before the CEO's like, I'm friends with so and so and we should invest in this event. A little
Yeah.
more strategic there. And then I think we're all more and more of us are in a remote setting. Not all of us, but we're all sitting at home today. I'm curious to understand how has that changed how marketing enables sales success today? How has marketing become more important in this remote setting and how has this new remote world affected it?
Well, look, there was a trend underway in buyer behavior where people wanted to self educate, they want to do their own market research, they want to scour the internet, they want to scour social media, and they were delaying and delaying engagement with the salesperson. So, so that was already happening. And, and one study showed a 238% increase in the 3 years prior to COVID of people wanting to evaluate vendors like on their own without talking to salespeople. So then COVID comes and that just accelerates the whole comfort level, the whole ease, the whole acceptance of remote work. And so now you have statistics coming to bear that say in a McKinsey study that was done in 2022, I think, it said 72% of the people would prefer a rep-free buying process. I mean, that's stunning, stunning. So this has really moved since COVID.
Yeah, and I would in my own, vendor analysis and buying experience, if I do have to talk to a rep, they better be additive to the experience. Like, I don't want just like a standard pitch. I want it to be like discovery and answering my specific questions and showing me a demo um and if it's just like I have to talk to you to get the information I could get online, then I don't want to do that. So marketing has to close that gap quite a bit.
You raise such an important point because if you just look at the demographics, somewhere around 65% of the buyers today are millennial and Gen Z. Millennial and Gen Z don't pick up the phone to call and have a human conversation. So we've got all these boomer CEOs thinking, well, let's just have a go to market. We'll have all these SDRs and salespeople calling all these people who don't want to talk to them. So really sellers today have to rely much more on marketing, softening the way. Do you have a social media presence where people can get research? Do you have pricing? Here's a big one. Millennials and Gen Z hate when you don't publish pricing. They want full transparency. And CEOs will always say to me, "Yeah, but I don't want my competitors to see my pricing." You can be mystery shopped pretty easily.
Yeah.
I'm sure they already know that. And there was a study done by Trustpilot that said, what are the irritants? What are the top three things that people, will be pushed away from a company? And one of them was pricing not available. Two is timeline, like get back to me. When I want something, I want that information. I want that data. And thirdly, you better really have just to your earlier point, a competent person, because I've done so much research to get where I am. My questions are not, how does it work? My questions are much more deep than that.
Yeah. As an elder millennial who will still pick up the phone to call family and friends, when a salesperson calls me out of the blue, I think I will never talk to them. Like, it is so off-putting to me, especially before or after work hours. Like, I'm just like, it feels so invasive to me because it's your personal cell phone, like, and this is like, you shouldn't be calling me on
It's
this
the best time to call people. So,
during dinner. Yeah.
yeah, of course, right? So, sounds like a lot of sellers are getting under pressure with this whole shift towards online, right? There's accelerated moment during the pandemic. And definitely we see that there's adjustment on the market, with the AI, probably that is even faster right now. But what, in your opinion, is the biggest mistake that the sellers are making in this new environment? Being online or operating with the virtual tools that are available to their use.
Well, I think there are a couple of mistakes. Number one is I think that they feel because they're operating from home, they can wear ball caps and show up in their pajamas for a business meeting. So number one, it's your presence. So I think that's still important to look professional as you represent your company. Number two, I think, is they spend too much time talking about themselves, right? So it's to the earlier point around do a discovery call, learn about your customer, have really smart questions, come prepared. You shouldn't be asking them any questions that are already answered in digital format. You should show up knowing how to having done your homework so you can ask second level questions that position you really differently. Um, Thirdly, and I'll give you one more after this. Thirdly, don't have a deck that just regurgitates everything about you. And we work with Google and we work with eBay and nobody cares, right? It's much more important to start the presentation about the company. Here's what I know and here's what I understand about your challenge. Dimitri, what would you add to that? And you get the client to engage and be part of this. So that's at the front end of the sales call. I think when you get to the proposal stage, the mistake is very simple. And I've made radical changes in companies that I've worked with previously, and the results are stunning. It is the following: you never email a proposal unless you have a time on the calendar to review it over Zoom or Teams. And if they won't accord you that meeting to review it, why would you even email them a proposal? Because people feel good about getting a proposal out and then they chase and the client ghosts and it was never really real in the first place.
So that is even if the prospect is asking me to do that.
The conversation should go something like this: Demetria, I really want to make sure our proposal fits exactly what you're looking for. So I'd like to set up a time for you to review a draft. Once you approve that it exactly meets your needs and all the information is correct, I'd be happy to send it over. That's a game changer.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're creating some connection. You also can clarify a couple of things on the spot instead of just making your prospect to wonder, right? Like, hey, is this or that? And then five other emails. So I can see how this works.
I think we get a ton of deals that get stuck in qualification or proposal because we've sent it out, but we never hear back. And if you can just close it out if they never set up a proposal call with you.
Yeah, and I think, when you're selling remotely, you have to slow down the sales process because you could be so speedy and go through it. And if you don't ask the right questions, you never really get that essence of you knowing the client and the client knowing you.
There's a flip side in this entire process. You do manage your sales process differently when you are a rep or a seller versus when you manage this as a manager. What would be your recommendation for those first line managers to do in order to improve that practice with the sellers, right? What they should be actually coaching the sellers to do, and how they should be doing this in order to be effective.
So I think it starts with two things. Number one, we got to know the destination. So what are we trying to achieve? And then work backwards so that we all know our own productivity measures. So, Dimitri, you may close half your proposals. I may close 70% of the proposals or the reverse. So everyone needs to have their own set of activity metrics. And those are the kind of the in process measures, right? They measure KPIs like, are we on track for you to hit your plan? And then I think the second piece is we have to know the results measures. And I think a good sales manager um, has a process for helping a salesperson think through every deal at every stage. So in a weekly one on one, we have to be understanding, well, what industry are they selling to? What are their unique problems? How are we impacting, something that's one of their top three priorities? How do you know that's one of their top three priorities? So we got to make sure they're on the right stack of mail. They're using the right company resources at all times because people just get lost with everything that's available. And thirdly, in process and results measures that we're keeping track of really tightly.
Yeah, so I agree with this because I've seen this very often. FLMs, they simply don't have a guiding principles how to approach these conversations. They often just ending up, hey, give me a list of things or give me a list of deals. Okay, this is coming, this is not coming. There's a 30 minutes. I mean, let's be honest. You're going to talk about the weather for 5 minutes or something, else that is happening in your private life. And the rest of the time you're going to spend on this. I mean, I don't think you're getting a full picture. I would probably, as a sales manager, show up with a few good deals that I vetted and I can actually bet on, than having the full list of things that actually could close, maybe not, and having most of them unvetted, right? So I agree with you. You mentioned something important about the presence, the online presence specifically. How do you bring executive presence and confidence into the video call, online meeting without being overbearing?
Yeah, I think it's preparation. So your online presence is partly visual. So like don't show up with a ball cap, right? But the second piece is I really think that there's a huge opportunity for people to do better homework. And really, instead of you talking all the time, your customer has to be talking a lot. And I always say to our people, if the customer's talking, we're winning. We're winning. And there's a really great company called the Trust Advisor who created this trust equation. And they say building, because you got to build trust if you're selling remotely, right? These people, it's not like it's a different feeling when you've never met someone. So the trust equation goes like this: T for trust equals your credibility, your reliability, and intimacy, which is the way you make people feel, all divided or diminished by your self orientation. And the worst thing that happens is salespeople go on and on and on and they never take a breath, right? And you got to give someone space on on a Zoom call or a Teams call, right? And I've had to work really hard at that because I could just keep rolling. And sometimes you gotta stop for 3 seconds.
Yeah, it's we like on Gong or any of, those platforms, you can see how much time the customer's talking versus your own team is talking. And sometimes we'll be like, well, why didn't they move forward? And the salesperson will be like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, you don't know because you talked 90% of the call. Like you only gave them so little time to actually tell you or like listen to them. And I think those are great tools as like even kind of a blunt measure of like, which reps are talking too much? What is the percentage? Can you kind of start to give them potentially a target to hit? And that might start at 50% and like, but let's start to get calls further away from that 70, 80, 90%.
And, I think part of the challenge there is a lot of salespeople don't have the business experience of the person they're talking to,
Yep.
right? So they get to this point and they go, gosh, I'm out of questions. I'm out of questions. And so my rule of thumb when I'm out of questions and I don't know where to go is I do the following. I say, well, tell me more and just be quiet. And that just moves it back to the client or the prospect and they can tell you more. And you can start to go, okay, here's where I want to go. But it really, I think the professional services industry does a really good job of teaching discovery. But beyond that, it all seems to be show up and throw up,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I think you bring a very good point. Professional services is the hardest thing to sell because it's all about relationship, right? If you don't have a relationship, it's really hard to do this. I'm finding this with my own consulting that that's the key piece. Needless to mention, you have to keep up with these contacts as well, right? It's not only show and tell and it's occasional once per quarter. No, no, you got to keep people warm, like really, and that's hard. Um, so let me push back a little bit on this because I think a lot of people in those situations they struggle with this silence, and that's making a lot of people uncomfortable, and they feel like okay, because I'm setting up this call, I'm a seller, I need to fill in with some words, some content. This is making me uncomfortable. I don't think this conversation is going right direction. So, what would you advise to these individuals in terms of how to overcome that situation, that fear?
Well, I think the first thing, it's pretty easy to tell when someone's thinking about what they want to say versus actually listening, right? And so you can use silence in a bunch of different ways. And I think people need to fool around with it. You need to give people the space so they can think and reflect, certainly depending on the disc profile person that you're talking to, for anyone familiar with disc. Um, and if you're talking to an introvert, I think, they're not gonna be all leaning in and forward and talking voraciously. So I think you have to pay attention to the type of person you're with, and I think you have to try. Just try. And, when our sales coach was coaching our team, he said, "Karen, just try. Just try." Because I have a tendency if I already know what they're gonna say, I just wanna get on to the next thing. And I've had to really think about give them space.
What's disc?
It's a personality profile that tells you different aspects, and it puts you into 4 different, buckets of whether you're a detail-oriented person, a hard driver, and sometimes it can be very helpful, either when you're doing a proposal that this person's gonna want a boatload of detail, or if you're, a high driver, mover, shaker, they just want the
Nitty
big
gritty.
points, so
Yeah.
it tells you how to serve them.
Interesting. Yeah. That makes sense.
It's called DISC. It's pretty well known. A lot of companies use it.
And you can identify, like, or did they give you like hacks to identify what the person is essentially and how to deliver information to them?
Yeah, it
Okay.
tells you a little bit about their personality style, their work style, and their expectations.
Yeah.
So it can be very helpful if you get good at picking out who's who.
Yeah. And reading the person. That makes sense.
I think a lot of these frameworks help, extremely helpful, right? They help you to structure your thinking, your thoughts, essentially, right? You're putting the effort in a specific way and to just define something and move forward and eventually make a next step. But a lot of frameworks, a lot of actions, people get busy. So I want to ask you this because we discussed this a couple of times before. The term chief problem solver. A lot of sales leaders are following into this trap. They supposed to be selling, they're supposed to help selling, they should do a lot of things that are related to the sales process, but they ending up somehow doing a lot of other things that are not helping them necessarily to sell. So, what would be your advice and suggestion for these leaders to avoid that trap and be more efficient?
I think you have to have a really good process for forecasting. I think you have to have a really good understanding of what a qualified opportunity looks like. And I think, having a team meeting where you're constantly training your people on this, because if you think about it, no one gets training anymore. So if you're not training your team in what good looks like, and start to have them shape a sales process that aligns with how the buyer wants to buy. So I think good sales managers partner with their marketing counterparts to get an understanding of what is the buyer's journey, what should we be emphasizing, and then I think training, objection handling, understanding, qualifying opportunities to understand whether or not something's a priority for a business person, of their prospect. Because so many times we think it's a great idea for your client, but the client, it's not attached to a priority that they're trying to solve. So I think they're highlights without going into like spin selling or challenger selling or going through a whole methodology. I think there are points that are also different for each person. Some people believe everything customers say. Some people can't close. Some people talk way past the close. There's actually a really interesting tool that Chief Outsiders provides its clients, called OMG, Objective Management Group. And it is a tool that allows you to assess your entire management, your entire sales team, and figure out exactly what skill set is challenging for each salesperson. So you can focus on that specific skill set. Additionally, it allows you for your new hires, it's got a 71% correlation as to whether or not that person's going to be in that role 1 year from now. Will they be successful? So it helps you level up your team and it helps you hire people that will have a much bigger likelihood of success.
And is it like a questionnaire that the individual sellers or potential hires take?
Yeah, it's an assessment, and then it's an assessment against, a configuration of a job that you put in specific for your company. It's really effective.
That's a great coaching tool for managers who want to really understand a little maybe more broadly. It sound that data would be very helpful in this. But if a rep is in a slump or not hitting their quota, how do you work with leaders to figure out how to get through that moment?
Funny you asked that question. That just reminds me of something way back in my days at Xerox. I was a sales manager. I had this top rep who was always going to President's Club, and she was just in a bad slump, right? Everything she touched turned, the wrong way. And so I said to her in a one-on-one, and I said, her name was Barbara. I said, Barbara, I am closing the order desk. I do not want you to bring in one more order. We're closing. We're not forecasting anything. Here's what I want. Remember earlier I talked about in process measures? I gave her an in process goal. I said, I want you to go out there. I don't want an order, no orders. Order desk is closed. I want you to find 6 proposals. And that's all we're going to do this month is we're going to deliver 6 proposals. And I took all the results pressure off her. And so we just went like banshees and we got 6 proposals. In that quarter, she went to President's Club. So I think sometimes it's focus on the right activities and don't worry about the outcomes. You do the right set of activities, the outcomes will likely follow.
Yeah, I thought something that was really interesting that you said before, because, people have like activities metrics that they want sales teams to hit. And you mentioned having different activity metrics for each seller potentially. And I think that is really important because sellers just sell in different ways. And if you hold everyone to the same standard, it's not going to result in the same. How do you take an average thing and say, oh, this is just going to happen across everyone? So I like that you switch that up a little bit for the individual.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense, if you have a 70% close rate, which, is pretty good, is pretty benchmark, then someone shouldn't be pounding on you to shift your time to more top of funnel,
Yeah. Ops created or whatever it may be. Yeah.
right? So I think you've gotta treat everyone and meet them where their skill set is.
Yeah, yeah. Similar to Barbara, in a remote workforce, understanding as a sales leader, understanding what your reps are doing, and keeping them accountable and motivated is harder. You're not seeing, that they're on calls or they're out to meetings or anything else. So how do you make suggestions to sales leaders to keep I hate to say keep tabs on their sellers, but to know how their sellers are doing?
Well, I think it's critical you have a one-on-one every week, and we talk about what news come into the pipeline, how we've moved opportunities through the pipeline, and what's anticipated to come out of the pipeline. One of the important things that I learned at Xerox, I kind of developed at Xerox when I was running a very large division where a lot of our product that we were moving was very high end printers, like 300, $400,000 printers back in the day. Imagine, um, and it was very important in that business to be able to forecast because you couldn't have these things sitting in the warehouse, right? And so we developed this process called path to closure. And I wrote about it in my book, and it's you and I sit down and we say, so you're looking to have solution ABC. When do you need this up and running? And you get an anchor point for when the client needs it up and running. And so, okay, well, if you need it by that day, I need an order by this day because we have a 30-day delivery or a 40-day or whatever it is. And then you back it up. And so, what happens if we need to ink that day? What has to happen on your side? And what do I have to do to support you as you go through your buyer's journey? Do you need a board slides? What do you need? How long is your legal review? And really getting into the buying process, but doing it in an anchored way where you have an end date. And so if I were a frontline sales leader today, I would be using a lot more of that to understand, do we really understand? Have we had enough dialogue with these people so that they can have that kind of conversation and that kind of clarity on the next steps and how we're going to get an order?
Yeah. And understanding what each of those things will look like, I think, you know, buying anything, typically you're working with legal and finance, and they're going to be big hurdle points. And so the more a seller can help me navigate my internal teams, the better. And the more leaned in I'm going to be. If they're just like, good luck, I'm like, okay, well, I'll get this approved when I can. Unless it's like a do or die situation, the vendor or the tool I'm buying.
And you don't want to wait till the end of the month when the legal team is busy trying to close their own contracts.
Yeah, I think it's even more acute when you're working in the hardware business. because there's also inventory that you have to take care of, right? And with the larger printers like this one, I have some preview. I was at a competitor place for a long time to
You see
Xerox.
his HP mug today? He's just, like,
There,
throwing it in your face.
it's exactly. Although it's HP Enterprise, so the different divisions than the printers. But that's even more important, right? Because there's so much about setting this up, training, shipping this, so much to consider. So yeah, slipping that deal is definitely throwing everybody off track. I agree. And I can confirm I have another client that I'm working with, and this method works. What did you describe?
You're backtracking to hit their goals, and then obviously they're gonna be happy if you're delivering to what their goals are,
Yeah.
so
And what I love about it is it comes from the customer's point of view, right? There's nothing worse than a salesperson who's doing everything from their point of view.
yep, yep. So we talked about this a little bit, dressing professionally is important. Do you have any other virtual communication hacks, like body language or screen sharing techniques, that help elevate a sales call?
Well, it's interesting. I was just on a virtual workshop, and the people for whom I was doing the workshop said, "Make it interactive." How do you make it interactive? It's very difficult. People put their screens on and off, and one is always show up, have your screen on, and encourage others to have their screens on so you can have better communication. But the interesting tool that I found and used is called Slido. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Slido. And it allows you to poll the audience. And so we could be doing a proposal where we've got all these stakeholders. Sometimes I was on an earlier call this morning. I think we had 9 people on the call. So I could just pull something up as a salesperson and say, well, let's just do a quick poll. What are people's top concerns? Are they concerned about this? And a word cloud will magically appear.
Oh, cool.
And everyone accesses it by a QR code.
Yep.
So I think anytime you can figure out how to engage people, and again, it goes back to the discovery call, right? Stop pitching and start asking and making sure that you have the right insightful questions, not the top level questions, but the right insightful questions that take the conversation to a deeper level.
Anytime I can recreate some version of the whiteboard, I am happy, which is what that sounds like. Okay, let's put all of our thoughts into this word cloud, and then we start to like pull out some themes from that
Yeah.
and so forth. Yep.
And you can do a poll.
Yes. Yep.
Right, you can do a poll, you can do, a multiple choice set of questions, so you can get really creative on how you use it. It's a nice way to get engagement when engagement is just so difficult.
Yeah, I think we use one internally. We do a lot of like quizzes and the beginning of like sales enablement sessions and stuff. I think it's called Cahoots. Same thing, like you text in a number and get access to it. It's pretty cool.
Oh, I haven't heard of that, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's like a quiz platform that a lot of high schoolers used for a long time, and then started to move into the business.
This is from
Yeah,
Well,
so
Gen Z grew up and they were like, let's bring
yeah,
this to work.
that's the graduation point, right? That a lot of these apps just graduating with the generation as well. Let's talk a little bit about the go-to-market trends. This is what I see right now on the marketing side, and Lizzie and I were discussing this several times in the past. Um, I think the Google search is being challenged with ChatGPT and other tools like this, and I think a lot of well, I try to be nice, but I think a lot of marketers today are wondering, how to drive the domain authority in this brave new world. What would be your suggestion on that front? What is your take on the future of the domain authority, um, as well?
well, everything's changing so quickly, I don't know how long my thoughts will be valid, but, I think right now domain authority is really important. And there are not enough companies that are tracking it. I think this is something you gotta track on a monthly basis. How am I doing? And there's some other tools that HubSpot has a tool that allows you to track um, AI sentiment and how you're performing in AI platforms. And um, I think your domain authority gets tracked to, do we have credible backlinks? Have we got the right kind of content? And then there's different types of content, and the content that you need to feed the AI engines is different slightly than the type of content you would use for SEO. So I think marketers really have to pay more attention to that. Um, so, if you're trying to feed Perplexity and ChatGPT and Claude and all of those, you have to think about it a little bit more strategically. Um, and you can literally, and I've done this for clients, you can literally go to the HubSpot grader for AI. You can just Google AI for, free HubSpot grader for AI. Put your URL in, put your geographic coverage, and it's going to tell you how you fare by AI engine against your competitors, right? And I'll just give you a Chief Outsiders example. We're a, heritage marketing company, and about a third of our business comes in through web leads, people coming to our website and saying they want to engage. That has changed so drastically from, on the bottom of our form, we say, "How'd you hear about us?" And they all used to say Google. And now at least 20 to 30% of them, and that's like a rough, are coming in, "Oh, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity." And people, it's just becoming part of people's work processes now. So if people aren't paying attention to that, they're leaving money on the wall. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, and I think it was Gartner, predicted huge declines in Google SEO effectiveness over the next couple of years. So this is real, it's happening, and those that get in the game now have a better chance than those who wake up, a year and a half from now and going, "Wow, when did this all happen?"
Yeah, the change is definitely accelerating. Um, do you think that a lot of that is driven by the fact that the ChatGPT enables the users to personalize their search so much, retaining the history of all the previous questions, so that the domain needs to be able to answer a larger set of content or serve the larger set of content for these users, and only that way they're gonna start popping up as a link in the results of the ChatGPT, or there's something else?
Well, I think it's the way you feed the content. It's not the same way you do it in SEO. You need to do more of Q&A so that it can pick up and start to understand the full sentences of the material. So, but if you go, this is so interesting. I mean, assume we're not even going to be thinking at all. If you go and run that HubSpot report and then put that HubSpot report into ChatGPT and say, "Give me the top 10 things I should do to fix this report and raise my score," it will tell you. It will literally tell you. And so it's not even that it's that hard anymore,
You do still have to execute. I
but
think
you have to execute.
And I think that's where, in the past, you had to do a lot to strategize, and you still do. I would argue that the humans will be needed to do strategies and build new strategies for new trends and that. But the strategy is a little bit easier to find and gather and understand what other people are doing. But you have to be able to execute. And companies that execute well will do well.
Totally agree. And I agree that it all starts with strategy, because if your execution is not informed by strategy and your strategy is not informed by market insight, it isn't going to work.
Yeah, the CEO can't just be saying whatever they feel like is the strategy and then you go execute.
I coined a phrase, the answer is never in the boardroom. because the answer is never in the boardroom.
Can you elaborate on this? How did you come up with that term?
How did I come up with that?
Yeah, just wondering.
She gets sick of boardrooms making decisions.
Well, I've probably made every marketing mistake that you could make. And I do recall a company I worked for where we decided in the boardroom we were going to deploy this strategy. And it had such a profound negative effect on the company that when we finally went and did market research and hired a consultant to go contact our clients and find out why they didn't buy, it was all self inflicted because we thought we ought to portray the company a certain way. And so that was a big, big, big lesson, a big lesson that, you really need to serve the customer the way they want to buy and to solve the problems that matter most to customers. I could tell you another story, a quick one from my Xerox days. Way, way, way early when they launched personal computers. They said, Karen, here's 60 salespeople in Montreal. We want you to be the program manager. Go out and sell PCs. Well, you couldn't give these things away. You couldn't give them away. They were positioned as word processors. Anyway, I said, well, I've got so much into this company. I can't fail now. What am I going to do? So I called up 10 CEOs. And remember, I'm doing this all in French. I got long blonde hair. I look about 12. And I said, could I please come and see you? I have a marketing question I need to answer. I went and I met 10 CEOs. And every single one of them told me, I would never buy this. Why would I buy this? I can use this and this and this for all our typing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, why would you buy it? And they said, well, to collect our money faster. I want to automate my accounting. And I said, so imagine I phone the largest accounting software supplier in Montreal and I say, I have 60 salespeople. We got to get some software to turn this word processor into an accounting system. Are you in? Long story short, we sold more in Montreal than the rest of Canada combined. And that was my very first lesson in the answer is not in the boardroom. With all of Xerox's resources, we
Yep.
couldn't figure that out.
Well, and I think something that's great about that story is not only was the decision made in the boardroom and you guys figured out that that was where the mistake was made, it's you didn't say, "Oh, well, it messed up in the execution." Like the going back to early in the conversation, the accountability piece of it, which is important, or you'll just keep rinsing and repeating that same cycle and thinking the problem's happening elsewhere.
Just quick follow-up question on this one. How much commission did you get that year?
Not
Kidding,
enough.
kidding.
But it did move my career out of Montreal and to run a national program in Toronto. So
It worked out.
So there
it
was
did
an
work
upside.
out.
Yeah, there you go.
It did work out.
I think you touched a little bit about talking about the consultants, and I want to connect this with another trend that we see for a couple of years, and I think again AI amplified that. It's a fractional work, right? And in particular, I see that there is a growing group of sales leaders and sellers itself that are offering their time as a fractional. Do you think that we are at the stage where companies realizing that they were overweighted in sales or hiring sales people, and now we're trying to recalibrate, or you think that that's just a temporary slump that we may be experiencing from the macro, and that's going to go back up to the regular business? What is your take on that?
Well, I would answer that question in two ways. You asked me about sales. I think it's a very different answer in marketing. On the sales side, I think you're seeing a lot of uptick in fractional work because nobody's training the sales leaders that are in place today. Nobody trained them. We have millennials and Gen Z who are coming up and they're getting these jobs, and it's, well, here, sink or swim. And so they're hiring fractional sales leaders to come into mid market companies. I'm not talking necessarily about the high powered SaaS VC company. I'm talking about a traditional company with a good product, good product market fit, and they have this young sales leader who needs coaching because they don't know what good really looks like. And so they're bringing in leaders to help them retool the sales force to bring best practices. And in some cases, they say, you know what, why don't you just stay with us? Just keep running it. In some cases, they'll say, you know, okay, we've got the people, the process, the technology now all in place. I think you can step away and become a coach on a monthly basis, right? But it's because there's just such a lack of what the movie needs to look like. If you're a technology company and you're hiring a sales leader and you hire them from your sales ranks, they've never been a manager before. Right? And so you have to learn how to manage, and then you have to learn what good best practices are in sales management, and you also have to learn what the heck is all the tech enablement that supports these people, right? And so I think that's the answer on the sales side of the house. On the marketing side, the sales leader you need when you don't have a really good the marketing leader you need when you don't have a marketing plan is very different from the marketing leader you need when you do. If you have a coffee company, let's just say, and you have retail stores and you roast beans and you sell beans. I don't know why I'm thinking of coffee, but um, wouldn't you benefit from having a CMO who launched a business like that as the CMO of Starbucks, come in and say, here are all the gotchas. Here's the things you need to know. Here's your customer acquisition costs. They've seen the whole movie before. They know what it's going to take when you decide you want to get here because they've been there, right? But they're not going to stay there. They're not gonna be your forever chief marketing officer because their value is helping you with your product market fit, getting the fundamentals in place, and getting everything set so that you can scale and you have a system built on people, process, and technology. Um, but I think that's also why you see so much turnover on the marketing side of the house. Because someone who goes, wow, this is a great product. Wow, we can scale this. They get in, they build the plan, and then, 7 months later, 10 months later, the CEO is going, "Why are we down 0.6 of 1% on this metric?" And they go, "Okay, I'm out of here. This is not the value that I'm gonna bring." So, the fractional world really makes a lot of sense for these mid-market companies to get that leadership when they need it most, when I don't know where to go. I need someone to help me figure out where to go.
Yep.
So I think it's different on the sales side and the marketing side.
And it might change for them, right? Like in mid-market companies go through so many phases, and ups and downs, presumably. And so the needs might change a little bit. As you were talking about the sales side, um, I was never trained how to be a leader. I was just kind of innately good at it, I guess, and watched how other people did and tested and learned, but there was no training program for that. And I've always worked in tech and it's assumed you might be there for a couple of years. I think it's so much different than, 30 years ago when it was assumed you might be at a company for 20 years of your whole career, so they would invest in you. And so as a leader now, I spend a lot of time like helping people figure out how to manage, even if they're not a manager, just like how do you, manage or run projects, but also get people behind you and engaged in things because there's just a void of it unless you're at a large corporation.
And I think, their employee expectations are different. They want to feel heard, right? I mean, we had a national meeting and we brought in someone to talk about the difference in working with millennials, Gen Z, and boomers. And they brought in a Gen Z person for their performance review. And the Gen Z gal said, well, would it be okay if I gave you a little feedback? Right? And so it's just an entirely different different, world and set of expectations today. And I think people really have to self-educate, and there's so many tools out there to do that. And the coaching community is so rich today. Whether you're a CEO or a COO, there are groups like Cameron Harold's COO group that really provide a community and monthly training for COOs, CFOs. You know, I think you've got to be part of a larger posse so that you're always garnering best practices and have sounding boards.
You have to find your people external. Like I'm part of partnership leaders, and that's been super helpful for what I do. And you're right, Gen Zs catch me off guard sometimes. I'm like, oh, you are advocating for yourself, and I love that for you.
So I want to move on and ask you about the something you also mentioned earlier in the conversation, that the sellers should actually follow what the customers and buyers are telling them, and more often actually is the other way around. But do you see that there's any specific behavior that on the buyer side that the seller should understand more, and that maybe will give them also an opportunity to get better at the work going forward? You mentioned listening, definitely something that to pay attention. But is there any specific tactic that they can apply in the work to get better at fitting the buyer's behavior?
Well, look, there are so many tools today. Lizzie, you mentioned Gong as a good sales tool. I think one of the things, it's really hard to be fully present and taking a bajillion notes, right? So if you have the ability to record a call and then to play back in you could stick it into Chat GPT and to play it back and categorize it and then send it to the prospect and say, Lizzie, I think when we talked about, we had these 4 issues, and you can make it so much more about the client when you had your next, face to face or Zoom to Zoom interaction. So I think that's one thing. I think you should always ask who else is going to be included in the proposal. And the reason I say that is because, for example, if you're in a professional services firm, or I think it applies across the board, but if you're proposing any kind of staff to do any kind of work, you have to assume that this proposal is going to the CEO's coach. It's going to the COO's coach for review. It's going to their Vistage group for review. It's not always who you think it is. And so you have to play to all those audiences. So I think, the proposal becomes important. And the last thing I say earlier in the sales process is, having really good qualification questions that understand, is this in fact a priority? So against all the things you have going on this quarter, Dimitri, how does this fit into your priorities? Because so many times we think it's a great idea, you know? And you're gonna learn that, the solution may save you 10%, but you're working on 4 projects that save you billions. I'm exaggerating. So you've always gotta be working on something that's your client's priority. I don't know, is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think so, because it's prioritization in general is a problem across the organization. So it can start with the erratic, founder, um, whimsical departmental leader. It can be a lot of things that is stimulating that. But I think in the most cases, it's really us who need to decide what the priority is, right? It's our work, our deliverables, and our accountability for the results that we committed to or we were given. And, in the end, the game is easy. You deliver or not. So I think there's a high correlation with the ability to prioritize that are fitting those objectives, and eventually succeed as well than not. I would agree with this. I'm always suggesting to people to ensure that they operate off the short list of priorities for every single day. That's what I do. But I want to ask you about something that I also noticed on social media. There's plenty of sellers that started to create their own set of posts, and they try to kind of create their own content. Um, and I was wondering, is this really approved by the CMOs and marketers, right? Because there's always a risk that if the sellers go rogue, a lot of messaging might go wrong way. What is your take on this trend?
Yeah, well, there's a lot you can't control, right? And a lot of times, mother is the necessity of invention. So if marketing is not helping you be successful, as a salesperson, do you really want to say, "Oh, well, marketing didn't do this for me. I'm gonna fail," right? So you figure it out, and know there's so many good tools. We happen to use one at Chief Outsiders called Gaggle.
Yep,
Mhm.
Have you ever heard of that?
we use
Yeah,
it. Yep.
I use that too.
And there you make it so easy for people to share really good company approved, authentic content that marketing's already done the work on to know that it's the right message on point. So I think, you know, I think almost every mid-market company and, startup that's got product market fit is well served to use a tool like that to make it easy for their people so they don't have to invent on their own.
Help curate for them instead of letting them go rogue. There are some salespeople I'm like, "Go rogue. You're doing great work out there, and the company can reshare it, but it's not everyone." For our last, rapid fire kudos round, I have a couple questions for you. So, what are 2 companies you're excited about right now? You mentioned Slido and Gaggle already, but give me 2 others.
Oh, I'm just having this reignited love affair with Slido. Two other companies. Well, look, you gotta love HubSpot. Okay, they're not new, but boy, they continue to do great work,
And they're the best to partner with. They're
and
one of
they're
my favorite companies to partner with.
they're great to partner with. What I love about them is they make things easy on the marketing side and easy on the sales side, and they make it easy for marketing and sales to communicate. This isn't necessarily a marketing thing, but there's another company called Scribe that helps you write a book. And I think books are wonderful marketing tools because they help you get down, your experience and can help spread the message in ways that other media can't. So, if you're thinking about writing a book and need help, Scribe is a company that can do that. But you can also start with blogs and turn your content into a little ebook and start to get some traction there.
I love that. That's not one we typically get. We usually get some nerdy tech products, so I like thinking outside the box.
Well, good because I'm not really a nerdy tech, so
Yeah.
I
We
fall
get some A
short.
No, we get some AI tool that I'm like, "I don't even understand what that does, but I will look into it." What are your top 3 tips for selling and leading effectively on Zoom?
Slow down the sales process, stop pitching and start asking, and spend time helping the buyer buy.
I love those.
Right.
Yep, and I think we went into detail on those. What's one book, other than your own, that every revenue leader should be reading?
When I joined Chief Outsiders 12 years ago, there was a book called Getting Naked. It talks about how in the professional services business, you should really be collaborating with your buyer. And I think it is more true now than ever, right? People are getting bombarded by messages, and you can't open your LinkedIn without getting some bot trying to get an appointment with you. And it had such a profound effect on me when I joined because I had never worked in a consulting firm before. And the way they position being helpful to your client, I think is a game changer for most people. Stop thinking about me, 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 and start thinking about Lizzie, Lizzie, Lizzie,
Yeah.
right? And if I do the right thing for you, good things happen, good things come out of it. But if I'm so self centered on me getting my message out, the only thing I do is push you away. Right? And so this book, Getting Naked, really talks about how do you have these much more authentic conversations with your clients, right? And help them focus, help them. And even if you do something that's not in your best interest, you build mounds of trust.
This is what I always would tell sellers. I was like, if they don't buy from you now, they will buy from you when they're ready to buy from you if you build trust and help them.
You're 100% right, and I'm kinda living proof of that. I did a workshop for a group of CEOs literally 10 years ago, and 6 months ago, the CEO calls, "You did a workshop for me 10 years ago, blah, blah, blah. I'm hiring you now." Not competing with 10 other firms. I'm hiring you now, right? Of course, not me, but one of my people.
Yeah.
But it's just remarkable how if you just try to do the right thing, build your reputation, and as a Canadian, the country's so small. Canadians really focus on building your reputation. It's just ingrained into you. And then when you come to the States, you go, "Oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity here."
You can burn bridges everywhere,
You can
but
burn bridges
no,
everywhere.
but you shouldn't.
But you should.
Yes. Okay, last but not least,
Uh,
what's a myth about selling or marketing that you wish would disappear?
Oh, wow. Well, one of them that OMG tests for is that clients always tell you the truth. And I think that's a big myth. Yeah. And so you have to really think about um, how you support your buyers.
Yeah. And what their motivations are and how do you get them to trust you? I love it. Karen, this was a wonderful episode. So many great insights from you. And I hope we can have you back again.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation. I had to kind of access the hard disk a few times, but it's great to catch up with you again. And thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
For the
Thanks.
pleasure. Thank you.